So with that now, I'll turn it over to Bill Pieper to introduce our speaker. Hold on just a second. I will edit this out of the okay.
Thank you, Rich. We have a speaker that is an expert in a very timely topic, and that is solar energy. Dr. James Fenton is the director of the UCF Energy Research Center and is a professor of material science and engineering. He leads a staff of 60 that does research, development, and education on energy technologies to enhance Florida and the nation's environment. There are 6 major program areas: solar energy, high performance buildings, electric vehicles, energy storage, and STEM education, along with workforce training and energy policy research. Please welcome Dr. James Fenton.
It's a pleasure to be here. I don't know if you know this unique view that you have here. There are 6 battery-powered buses somewhere out in that fleet. Okay, and we're involved with that project jointly with OUC at the University of Central Florida. I'm going to talk to you about a little bit of everything. Okay, first I want to talk about where we are. I just want to tell you a little bit of some interesting things about UCF. So the University of Central Florida is trying to come up with standards to make us fossil fuel free by 2040. We're anticipating our buildings will have to be improved efficiency wise by more than 20%. And the goal is to be net zero emissions. There's a lot of people that run around and do all kinds of things in addition to facilities and so forth. I've sort of given you these little leads here. Solar plays a role, energy efficient buildings, smart microgrids, hydrogen fuel cells, turbines, batteries, workforce, biomass and CO2 and catalysis and things, improved infrastructure. And then it sort of involves the whole campus getting involved with that. We're working with that now to try to come up with that plan and actually implement it. I do want to point out something that's unique. We're the only university in the United States that actually has 3 utilities that serve our needs. Out in Cocoa, I have Florida Power and Light, which is where I'm located, the Florida Solar Energy Center is. Our main campus is in Duke territory, and the downtown campus in Lake Nona are in OUC territory. And so we provide a reasonable amount of money to those entities to keep the lights on. We're still working with them in partnership to maybe do a little bit more renewable, more cost effective for the university and so forth. So that's good. Complicated graph. Most important thing is we spend a lot of money buying what are called primary fuels that come into the state of Florida. We don't make any natural gas here. Okay, we don't make any fossil fuel petroleum, which we can use for transportation. And so right now, the state of Florida spends about $38 billion on primary fuels. And the problem with energy is when you spend money on it, it's like burning the dollar bill up. Hopefully you get a good experience out of using that energy somehow, but there's no wealth creation, it's gone. So we throw $38 billion to other states for the right for us to burn it and turn it hopefully into something useful. If you look all the way over here to the right, you can see that most of what we do is burn it and literally throw it away. 73% of that disappears in the form of heat. We only get 27% useful services out of all the fossil fuels and energy, even the solar, you could argue, that we come in here. We waste it all. So the last thing I want you to do is use energy. Now, a lot of that energy we turn into a more useful thing. So in fact, we actually make $24 billion worth of electricity in the state of Florida. So we take some of that primary fuel stuff and turn it into electricity. You can see that that's not a very efficient process as well. You can see here that only 38% of the energy that comes in gets converted and sent to the customer as useful electricity. Okay, so we can obviously get a lot more efficient. Now, in fairness, 38% for fossil fuel to electricity is much better than what you do with your car. Right now, you take fossil fuel and you only took 21% of it to make the wheels go round. The rest of it's rejected heat. Okay, so in total, then, we spend $63 billion on energy. Does anybody know what the state's budget is? I guess some of you got to know what the state's budget is. It's about $100 billion. And don't we argue about whether a dime belongs in the teacher's pocket or your pocket? Why aren't we arguing that we're throwing over 73% of $63 billion down the toilet? That's what we do. And because it's cheap, we don't seem to care about it. Eventually it won't be cheap. And you may have seen prices of oil go up because of Ukraine and Russia and all that. Okay, but we didn't know, but we don't use energy wisely. We can do a much better job. That was the purpose of this slide. Oh, good. Well, what can we do in homes? Believe it or not, when you buy appliances, I guess you shouldn't believe it or not, you do. When you buy appliances, you get a little sticker on there and it tells you how much energy this is going to use and whether it's an efficient appliance or not. We can do that with your house. We can do that with big buildings too. So we can actually go in and grade them. On a scale of 0 to 100 for a residence, 100 is the typical home that would have been built to code about 5 years ago. The average home in Florida is probably around 140, I believe, on this scale. Older homes weren't built to that code. Does anybody know what code means? It's the worst building you can build allowed by law. Is that the building you want to own? No, of course not. You want to own a building that cost effective over the lifetime of your ownership of owning a home. Okay, and so we can make homes more energy efficient. This is an example of a home that was rated with a 7. Okay, on this HERS index. This is an example of a net zero energy home. Of course, most of you all know what net zero is because it's in the newspaper every day. Okay, and I'll talk about that a little bit too. Okay, can you own solar? Can you not? Are you paying for the infrastructure? We'll get into that a little bit. Okay, but we can actually grade our homes. So the most important thing for you to do to increase your wealth is to make your home more energy efficient. And paybacks on investments, switching from incandescent light bulbs to LEDs are huge. Okay, the little bit of money you spend on LEDs, you'll get it back in spades. Okay, bigger, more costly things like tearing out existing windows and replacing them, or taking a perfectly good air conditioner and replacing it with a brand new one that's more energy efficient. You're probably better off waiting until it breaks. Okay, we're good. This just shows you a study I want to show about. So in the 1950s, these homes that we dealt, this was an interesting project. When we had a lot of the foreclosures on homes back in the 2008-9 timeframe, banks ended up owning the buildings. A collective group of banks, and along with the Department of Energy, said, hey, FSEC, go back and see how well you can cost effectively retrofit these, and can we, the bank, when we put them back on the market, make more money than we did, than we thought we were going to make. And so we showed that we could do that. So in 1950s, we had scores of 163. We turned them down to 74. These are all cost-effective things that were done. And of course, the banks flipped them and made even more money on the whole deal. But and that's where you make more money, selling real estate on the other side. But nonetheless, you can show that we were able to do this. But you can't really categorize what's the best thing to do for any given house. Obviously, a 1950s house does not have 1950 appliances in it. Okay, so they're all a little bit custom, but it can be done. It can be done. This is a busy graph. It is important to show history though. So back in 1993, the average home in Florida, and this is per year, used about 12,500 kilowatt hours for a whole year. Okay, we started this. So these are the numbers that actually occurred. So we started doing this. Well, so in the 1993 to the 2003, and this is per household. Okay, it looks like, oh, everybody's needing a lot more energy. Okay, and sure enough, the utilities, when they did their 10-year forecasts at any given year, drew these lines. This is where we passed advanced cost recovery for nuclear power plants that we later on realized we didn't need to build, because we extrapolated this data and said, oh my gosh, we need more energy. Turns out you all discovered the compact fluorescent light bulb. Okay, and now, oops, we don't need it anymore. Actually going flat. Over the last several years, it's actually decreased. Now, for the first time in 2018, they actually predicted that you'd actually use less every year. But we keep adding more, in Florida, we keep adding more customers, so I do need to build more power plants, but each person is using less. Now, the nation as a whole, as an average, predicts this number at about 1%. So Florida, I could argue, could be doing a much better job than we do, as far as being more energy efficient. Another busy graph. The important thing here is the orange line and the green line. The orange line is solar. Back in 2019, this is 30 this is actually in dollars per megawatt hour, but this is actually 36 cents a kilowatt hour. That's 3 times what you pay. The only place you were putting solar energy was on the International Space Station because the extension cord would be way too expensive. Okay, that was the reason why we did it. This is the price of natural gas combined cycle power plants back in that particular time. It was 63, it'd be 6 cents. This is for the utilities to make it, about 6 cents. Remember, they sell you at 12. Okay, so this was, nobody in their right mind would do it. You can see here for utility solar, it crossed around in about 2015. And sure enough, our utilities in Florida have been putting more and more solar in like crazy. Okay, and you could also argue that combined cycle, wind and solar are both can succeed. The worst power plant you got is the gas peaker up here at the top. And the gas peaking power plant, the utility has to own them because by law, they have to sell you electricity no matter when you want it. Gasoline station can close its doors if it wants to. There's nothing wrong with that. The utilities can't close their doors. They have to reliably provide you power at all times. So when we peak, because we all turn our air conditioners on at 6, they have to sometimes run this power plant, which right now, according to this, would cost them 17 cents a kilowatt hour. They're selling to you at 12. They don't want to turn that thing on. So they'll give you a rebate on your air conditioner. Because you don't turn your air conditioner on, I don't have to sell you this. It's cheaper for me to give you a rebate. Utilities won't give you a rebate on your refrigerator. They want you to have the worst possible refrigerators you can. That runs at night where we make cheap electricity. So we don't want you to be efficient with a refrigerator because it runs all year long. You just got to follow the money and all this stuff. Dramatic changes. Okay, we'll do this kind of quick. Right now, there's lots of controversy in Florida about who owns the solar and all this other stuff. Well, let's tell you the history about it. In California, the utilities own 56% of the solar. The customers own 44% of the solar. And customers in California have more solar than any utilities, including Florida, in the United States. Here's Florida utilities right here. Here's California rooftop customers. Now, you can always like whether you like California or Florida or not, but the facts are it seems to work in California. Okay. Now, California is running into these same net metering problems because as we add more and more renewables onto the grid, okay, we have these things called duck curves and grid instability. And yes, you need to add more storage, and who's paying for the storage? But I want to point it out, California, Arizona at 44%, New Jersey's at 67%. And New Jersey had way more solar than Florida did, rooftop-wise, a long time ago, because New Jersey's electricity prices are actually more expensive than ours. So their electricity prices are about 18 cents. So when solar got to 16, they bought. When solar got here to 16, we compare it versus 12, we're not buying. We're buying now. And now we're in this argument that we're all in, okay, or we don't want to be. Now that was back on the total amount of solar. Now percentage of electricity that is solar. So California has 22% solar. Okay, 45% of which is rooftop. And you can see all the states are ranked above us. We're down here on the bottom. You'll also notice that a lot of these, I mean, Massachusetts is 17.4% solar and 66% of it is on the roofs. And they don't have a good solar resource either. So it is about money. There's no question about it. Not necessarily the resource and policy and so on and so forth. You can see down here, Florida's in what I call the red zone, is that they're not that high in rooftop, and it's only 2.3%. So if we have 17% of the 2.3% that's rooftop, is the amount of rooftop solar that we have in Florida really affecting your bill at all when it's only 0.2% of the total amount? Okay, argue about whether you think it does or not. I'm just putting it in context. Go to the next one. Okay, this is an interesting thing to look at costs of solar depending on who owns the solar. So over to the left here, we have the residential solar. You can see here for a residential customer back in 2010, 56 cents a kilowatt hour, and you could get it out of the wall at $12. I mean, 12 cents a kilowatt hour. So nobody was doing residential in 2010. This is without federal subsidies or any of those kind of things. you can see the utilities were doing it at 30 cents in 2010. The utilities in 2017, without any subsidies and things, were able to make it less than what their cost of a natural gas turbine was. And as I said before, utilities in Florida started doing this. You can see in 2017, we, the customers on our roof, were making it 17 and we're paying 12. Now, if you had the income tax credit, which we did back then, I could argue that this was cost effective back then with federal income tax. In 2020, it's cost effective, even without the income tax credit. And yes, you can get it. The important thing I do want to point out is look at the difference between this number and this number. It's a big number. Okay, look at the difference between this number and this number. So the utilities will always be able to make it cheaper. The question is, can they sell it to you cheaper versus you making it itself? It's not, they can make it cheaper. Yes, economy of scales, they make it cheaper. The difference though is 5 cents versus 3 cents. So can the utilities really ship it to you and still make a profit when the difference is only 2 cents? The answer is no, they can't. Okay, but that's 2030. We're not there yet. Now, if I actually add on the transmission cost for the utilities to make it with this solar prices and ship it to you, you can see that in 2020, I can make it 11 without subsidies and use it myself. And their cheaper solar made it 3, they're shipping to me at 12. Which are you gonna buy? That's the heat of the whole debate that you're in right now. The question is, when utilities add power plants, the customers pay more. Whenever you buy anything new, of course you pay more, okay? That makes sense. It's the shareholders who make the profit. When you put solar on your roof, you make the profit, and you, the residents, win. Anyway, go dive down deeper with any of you who'd like to afterwards about the details of the bill. I wanted to throw one other thing out to you. These are the same curves you just saw before. Well, what happens with batteries? Batteries are too expensive right now, and there's no business model. Don't go out and buy a battery. I actually own a gas generator, and I hope I never have to turn it on. Okay, because it's an insurance policy. That's the same thing with the battery. Okay, the solar, you make money every day. It lowers my electric bill every day. I make money on it every day. The battery is not really a business model. But in 2018, if I chose to buy the battery, it'd be 18 cents. Keep in mind, I'm paying right out of the wall. Okay, so if I wanted to do in 2020, buy a battery that would, along with the solar, that would cover my house, make it a net zero energy thing, and that I didn't use the grid at all, it cost me 18 cents. But I'll remind you, I'm paying 11. If I do get the income tax credit, which right now the income tax credit is 22%. It's in not the infrastructure bill, but the Build Back Better bill is to take the 30% for the next 10 years. That hasn't passed, but I'm still upbeat it might, okay, in some other way. Like what I want to point out is that by 2030, this is 7 cents, and 2030 without it, it's 10. So by 2030, you can afford to buy solar and buy a battery, and if you wanted to, on average, get off the grid completely. That's just 8 years from now. Okay, let's switch subject matters. Cars, vehicles. This is a picture of the Easter Parade in New York City. In 1990, and this, I apologize about the picture being a little bit grainy here. If you looked at that parade, you'd have found only one car. Okay, here you only find one horse in 1913. It changes that fast. And it wasn't government policy. By the way, very interesting thing. A committee met in 1888 to discuss the problems in New York City. You know what the #1 problem in New York City in 1888 was? What are we going to do with all this? You know what? Okay, the projections were that New York City would be 8 feet deep in it. And the only solution was to do what? Horse truck it out. Ooh, yeah. Okay, so magically, the city planners didn't think about cars, but they came to the rescue. Okay, now electric car prices, much like solar prices, they follow these learning curves. Okay, what I mean by learning, yes, the technology gets better, but it's usually as you make more and more and more, the price drops and drops. Conventional power plants, that's not true. Time goes on, their prices go on. But things that are technology driven, not stuff that comes out of the ground. I remind you, in the case of solar, the fuel is free. You're just paying for equipment. Okay, and that's true with the batteries. You pay for those. Okay, and you can see that if you look at these prices over here, this is for the lithium-ion battery, typically variations of that are used in all our cars with electric. You can see here as they make more and more, the price goes down. Okay, where they're forecasting is that the break-even point is about at $100 a kilowatt hour for the battery, and they're claiming at this time the year is 2023. Interestingly enough, this was blown apart in the last 2 years. This slide's about 2.5 years old. It turns out the break-even point isn't the price anymore. It's when 10% of you have it, the rest of us think it's a good deal, and we go out and do it. There's a lot of interesting things as to how you change buying behaviors. A Toyota Camry compared to a 350-mile range EV, which didn't exist in 2019 either. These are the cost differences. This is the cost difference in 2021. This is the upfront cost. They're equal in 2023. And I'll remind you that there's less maintenance in that electric car. And by the way, I would never buy a battery-powered chainsaw because they use way too much energy. But I'll sell you on my gas blower. My gas blower is not a gas blower. It's the battery-powered blower. Best blower I've ever had. Twice as much power, my hands don't fit together. Unfortunately, chainsaws just need a lot of energy, so they're tough. Okay. But I wish you luck with that. I own the blower, but I don't own a chainsaw. Anyhow, the prices will come down. Let's go to the next one. I also want to show you where batteries are actually. Has anybody been on a test ride with a Ford EV 150 Lightning? Oh, I got to tell you about this. I have friends that live in the New York City area. And so all those people that put $100 down, they let them go on a test drive. A professional driver drove it. Okay. All right. They gave the passenger a helmet. The professional driver wasn't wearing a helmet. He took him around the curves and turns and accelerated like crazy. And all these men in there, jaws dropped because they thought they were going to tip over in this car. I mean, these guys were going real fast around this course. Okay. They're all really pleased that they put the $100 deposit down. Okay, it's a better vehicle, and you may have seen it. I strongly recommend you go look at the Ford EV 150 Lightning on a website and watch all their videos about how they'll power your houses and all this other cute stuff. The rules are going to change. Much like your phone is not a phone anymore. It's everything else kind of but a phone. Okay, the same thing you're going to find out with the cars. What I do want to point out is where all the batteries are going to be. Believe it or not, by 2030. We will clearly have way more batteries in passenger vehicles. And we'll have a little bit in stationary storage. The consumer electronics are about equal to the stationary storage. So the interesting thing is, between the consumer electronics, all owned by customers, and the cars, all owned by customers, you, the customer, will have more storage than the utility does, even as we go farther down this path. So we may choose to use our vehicles. They will always be plugged in. You'll be buying or you'll be selling. Okay, and we'll be managing electrons that way. So a lot of these things are interesting. Okay, do I need to speed it up? I want to show you, this gives you on a percentage basis as to what the world does today to make electricity. Okay, you can see here that even today, we don't use that much oil to make electricity as we used to. This is back in the 70s. We actually used to use burnt oil a lot. But you can still see we have a reasonable amount of coal and a reasonable amount of natural gas, a little bit of oil, nuclear, hydro, and then wind and solar have started to come on board. This is the prediction by the year 2050 without policy changes and what are predicted economics with these things. So it's what I would call kind of a business as usual. You can see even with business as usual, we'll get to 69% renewables during this prediction. Right? Unfortunately, that prediction keeps us up at this amount of CO2. And if your goal, and I say if your goal is to go ahead and lower down the temperature rise to less than 2 degrees, this is about 3.2 by the year 2050. If you want to get below 2%, we need to cut all that out. If you want to get down below 1.5, you need to cut all this out. And you can see where it goes. This is the world we get. So the power industry is this big black one. Industry, transport, and buildings. Buildings do play a role. Okay. Now, how do we get to that point? Let's go to the next slide. This is a path if we electrify everything. So we use electricity for a lot of other things. So in the steel making industry, we'll go ahead and use electricity instead of carbon and things like that. Coke to go ahead and make our steel and so forth. So these are the E's of the trends. That still doesn't get us there. And that number there is right here, purple. To get to net zero, we will have to make that much electricity. We will go from making 24 billion watt hours. No, that's already terawatt hours. 24,000 terawatt hours to 4 times that amount electricity. A lot of that will be wind and solar, but a lot of that wind and solar and other things, maybe nuclear is an example as well, will actually make hydrogen. There is an advantage. Electrons you can't store in a bag or a box. You can store them in the form of chemical energy, but you can also store hydrogen in the form of chemical energy. So that's probably what we'll start to do. Real quick, and I'm almost finishing up here. This just shows you where the world is at in solar in the energy form, terawatt hours. This is where we were back in 2000. There wasn't any, 31. 2010, remember I started telling you things started changing in 2007, the year before that is an example. And then this is what they think they're going to do. On a percentage of electricity, and I told you Florida right now, Florida's down here at 2.2%. But the world as a whole is 11.6. And we think with this goal, try to get to net zero emission, if we can successfully do it economically, cheaper than what we're doing today. And I'm one of those believers that think we can, if we do it right, wisely. We'll end up with 84.5% wind and solar. Now, a lot of that wind and solar we make, 58% of it in 2050 will be making hydrogen. So you can imagine OUC is going to be selling you electricity to put in your cars or selling you hydrogen and managing electrons rather than being in the business of making electrons. Because everybody will be able to make electrons and we'll have to sell it uniformly and fairly and all that other kind of neat stuff in the wire. So if we want to then not import any fossil fuels into Florida, we want to keep the only spills on our beaches is from the sun itself. Okay, so I'll remind you, I get skin cancer, so you still need to protect yourself from that stuff. Okay, that's kind of where this plan's going. I think that I got one more. Oh, yeah, flip one more because I got another drawing up here. This is some of the problems we have with solar in Florida. This is actually a solar field in Orlando utility territory. This top scale is 9. This is actually the solar field that's at the Stanton power plant on top of a coal dump out there that they have. And when on a nice sunny day when they're making 9, all of a sudden the cloud goes over and almost drops off. So they have some problems with this. We're actually doing a demonstration project. We're actually making hydrogen. The utility controls the electrolyzer that makes the hydrogen to dampen all this out. And at the same time, make useful hydrogen. The other problem we're going to run into, and this is what they call a high ramp rate curve. So this is actually an average Florida load on a single day, of which their concern is as they add more and more solar. So what happens is you add higher percentages of solar. Like I said, we're at 2%, we're not even on here. We're still that black line. But as you add more solar, you keep, oops, sorry. Did I do that? Or, you know, can you go back one? Okay, we'll just skip it. It's okay, that's fine. Don't bother. Oh, you went forward a couple. That's okay, that's still fine. All right, this is the actual project that OUC is actually running. It's a small electrolyzer. We're using their solar field, their floating solar that they have out there. In addition to their building loads, and we're putting an electrolyzer in, and we're trying to fuel vehicles with it. We're trying to dampen out their solar problems and things like this. And then we'll also have a deployable fuel cell that if they lose power to their water plant, they sell water here as well. Okay, we have a backup generator to run that. So that's the demonstration project we're running. We can go to the next one. Okay, now I'm not close. I stole this from Shell Oil. Okay, happens to be probably a more forward-thinking oil company than a lot of the others, but it still is an oil company. So this is what Shell Oil is telling you the future is going to be like. So right now, all these things use fossil fuels. Ships, cars, long-haul trucks, airplanes. That's what they do today. Okay. You can see down here that our homes use gas and electricity. Likewise with buildings and our factories. And you can see that there is some little bit of windmill, there should be a little solar in here somewhere, but maybe not. Okay, so we get to those activities. This is their 2070 scenario. Here you can see we still like that liquid oil stuff when it comes to these big ships. And when you're making really long distance things, liquid energy is easily to deal with. So we like it for that. But believe it or not, you start to get into a little bit of hydrogen, which is this light blue. And this is probably a biomass fuel of some sort. Yes, it's a biomass fuel. You can start to see that all the vehicles, these trucks have switched over to electric. You can see that there might be a little bit of fuel cell trucks running or fuel cell cars on hydrogen. Though you can combust hydrogen, so you still can do a combustion engine. The big rig trucks will start being biomass, still oil, and start to do fuel cells. Okay. Airplanes, they won't be batteries. Little small airplanes you can for short distance travel, but for long haul travel, the fuel, the energy of a gallon of gasoline is huge. Okay, I used to know how much energy went through your hand when you pumped it, and when you realize what that is compared to a bomb or something like that, it's pretty scary stuff, but we're all used to it. Okay, it's a lot of energy. And believe it or not, if you've ever used anybody used a fast charger, electric fast charger? You notice that the cable on the fast charger is about the same diameter as the cable on your gasoline pump. And believe it or not, that's all wires in there. It is thick and it's very heavy. Okay, you're putting a lot of energy in when you charge a car. The other interesting thing is that what Shell Oil tells you is that in their mind, they're not in the fossil fuel business in 2070. Okay, they're in other businesses. And one of the things they're talking about here in 2040, Shell Oil thinks you'll be on your first intercontinental hydrogen-powered plane in 2040. Now, you can argue there's a little bit of greenwashing going on here. It's right now, it's in the best interest of utilities to get up there and say, hey, look, we like hydrogen and all this stuff. Well, it's conveniently far enough down the road, we can still slip the other things by you and still talk about neat, wonderful stuff. But they are serious about it, though. Even there is some greenwashing, I won't dispute that. But they are switching into this. And then here you start to see these really long haul trucks probably going with hydrogen. And then even here, the plan is to go negative. So we got to plant a lot of trees. We got to improve the quality of the buildings we build. The nice thing in Florida is we have the chance to do this because we build new buildings all the time. You might as well build them cost effective and cheaper and better up front. And maybe the goal isn't to minimize your cost today, okay, but to minimize your environmental impact and maintain your cost as if you did nothing. In the past, I've always tried to beat doing what business as usual. And my goal was always to find the best making money business. I could argue maybe now I'm quite happy paying the same price, okay, and having a building that's worth a lot more and not putting any extra environmental stuff in the environment. So how you optimize all these things going forward can be a little bit of a challenge, but we're up to it. And that is my last slide. So it's now cheaper to save the climate than to destroy it. Let's start doing it. We'll make money.
How, if I put in solar today, how long would it take to amortize the investment?
Okay.
And secondly, are there any incentives? You talked about income tax, federal income tax. Used to be Florida had, the state of Florida had some sort of tax break. So what's on offer?
Okay, I'll answer both those. First, I can tell you about the time of payback, but I prefer not to tell you that. You know why? I'll tell you what it is. Okay. I'd rather ask questions. Do you own your own roof? This is important. Okay. Do you already have $10,000 as an investment already? In other words, you could take $10,000 out of some investment and put it in a better investment. You're willing to do that, all of you? Okay. So right now, solar on your roof is 13.1% internal rate of return, and it's fixed for the next 25 years. So if you got $10,000 and you're doing better than 13%, keep it there. Now, the payback is 8.9 years. But what does the payback mean? It means that, yes, you're paying sort of the same price you did with the utility up to years 8.9. And then from 8.9 to years 30, when the light panel's left, you're paying nothing. Okay, so what does that 8.9 really mean to you? As an example, if you went out and bought a Corolla versus a Camry, what's the payback on buying a Camry over a Corolla? There isn't one. They're both lousy investments. Okay, you're better off walking. So that's why I don't like that question. But go ahead.
So quick question, roughly 15 million cars are sold in the US every year.
Right.
We want to get to 7.5, I understand the president's goal is half of that by 2030.
Right.
7.5 million cars. Presumably they will charge at night.
Well,
Does it
yeah.
shine, right?
Okay, good. If you do it all at home, that's probably right. Yeah.
Well, let's say not 80%, right?
Yeah, okay, right.
Pick a number, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. How is that going to impact the electrical grid? Because the baseline power at night is much slower than the rest of the time, so we're going to upend the.
No, well, it actually turns, well, here's the truth of what you're saying. Right now, without solar on the grid, the electricity, we got plenty of electricity at night. And the price is really cheap. Okay, so utilities, when you first get started, will encourage you to charge at night. Okay, and they'll continue to do that. Eventually, when we have plenty of solar around, it might be that you're charging at work using the free solar that the company gives you. You drive your car home, you plug it in, and it gives energy to your house to run your air conditioner. I'm not sure exactly how that works. But even after we look at that, the total energy that we consume when we add the electric transportation in it is relatively small. High-speed chargers located in rural areas that don't have the power lines, yes, we have to fix that. It's a complicated answer, but it'll be a minimum effect on all that.
Well, my concern is, I don't think anybody's really saying, how are we going to address this? Particularly the utilities.
No, we are. The utilities are, well, the utilities are all doing that, and the utilities are actively engaged in where they put those chargers. So I can promise you that. But I'll be happy to talk to you about that later some more.
Okay. Many of us, not all of us, but many of us don't believe in the religion of climate change.
Okay.
Specifically, what financial assistance is there for us to adopt solar energy? There used to be the state would give you back 20%, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but you didn't do it specifically.
Yeah, right.
It said, say I want to put solar on my new house.
Right.
How much is it going to cost me? What rebates am I getting?
Right, I can answer that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you asked me that question earlier, and I didn't answer that one. Today, you can put solar on your roof at about $2 a watt. I know that doesn't mean anything to you. I put 5 kilowatts up. I spent $10,000. Okay. I am allowed currently, as are you, to go ahead and put that solar on your roof. And by the way, I did get at my time a 30% income tax credit. Today, you can get 26%. I paid the equivalent of 4 cents a kilowatt hour electricity, and I got that 13.1 cent I was telling you about before. Today, if you did it, you'd probably get 12 and a half, if I had to guess, okay, with the income tax credit on the roofs. Today, you're allowed to even generate more solar than you need during the day and push it through the wires and then buy your own solar back. And it's really literally rotating the meter backwards, okay? And right now, that's legally allowed in Florida. We're having big battles on whether that should. And offline, I can talk to you about all the pros and cons of that. Okay, so the answer to your question, yes, you can do it. And they're even talking, if the bill does pass, which I hope it doesn't, but if it does pass, you'd still be grandfathered in. Okay, so yeah, you can make solar on that without putting any price on carbon, without anything else like that. Currently, legally, you can do that in Florida. Now,
2 questions. One, you mentioned Ford F-150.
Right.
Who makes a cost-effective, totally electric, smaller price SUV, other than the big names that are going to the price?
yeah, well, so right now, you can't get your hands on any of them right now. So when you say today, the answer is even Ford doesn't do it. There was a reason why the electric vehicles were all in the Super Bowl, because they can't sell your regular cars right now. You go in there right now, they don't find any. So let's sell the cars we're going to sell in the future, because you can't come to the lot anyhow. So to answer your question, you can't get one today at all. Okay, 2 years from now, that's a different story. Okay, and I can't tell you on what you define as small. I will tell you, with the Ford 150 EV in 2 years, the upfront cost of that vehicle compared to the comparable one with the internal combustion engine, they're the same price. 2 years.
Second question, last question. They retired the enormous neutral submarine. These carriers are all nuclear.
Right.
You never hear about Hudson Island or Homestead, yet we've got 4 nuclear plants, but you never hear about the cheapest electricity state. What's wrong with doing solar in the daytime and building a packaged nuclear plant whose waste is smaller than that podium?
Yeah, okay, a couple things. We do have several in the South. We have a reasonable number of existing nuclear power plants, and they're doing relatively well. The downside, as we add more renewables during the days, and we can get to the point where Germany, as an example, in a typical day will be 50% solar in the middle of the day, not at night, they're not. Okay, and the downside with nuclear power plant is that it doesn't like to cycle up and down like this. And so as you add more and more renewables, you run into struggles. Now, we are working at small modular nuclear power plants, and we may see those. Okay, and you may see that we judiciously put those, I believe, out at places where they'll be making hydrogen. Okay, and so I have a small nuclear power plant that makes you a fuel that you can put in the pipe and ship to your houses or do whatever you want, or you can stick it in your cars. And so we'll see that. And yes, it can put electricity on the grid too. Okay, I think you're going to go from big, huge, giant centralized power plants that get large economies of scales, but you got to pay for a lot of wires to get it out, to more distributed, even with the existing technology. So I think there's a room. I agree with you. And I agree with you about the subs too, by the way. They are all very effective. And by the way, guess how they breathe air in the nuclear sub? They electrolyze water and throw the hydrogen overboard. Unfortunately, the Russians can find that hydrogen, by the way. But the interesting thing is they use the oxygen. That's how they stay under. So we're already using electricity to make oxygen. Oh, yeah.
Two questions, really. First of all, I drive to North Carolina, about 500 miles.
Yeah.
I buy an electric car, except the problem is in about 400 miles, it runs out.
Yeah, I agree.
So what happens?
Well, right now you're
Yeah,
right.
Oh, and the second question is, would you use 110 volts or use 220 volts?
Oh, okay. I'll ask both those questions. The first one, by the way, I drive up to Vermont and actually pull my boat all the way up to Vermont. And yes, I have a Yukon XL. Okay, it is the best gas mileage per person vehicle I run. I don't drive it by myself. Okay, but I do pull a stink pot boat, which even uses up more energy. And yes, I find out in my particular case that there's another tank that tends to fill up as I go on the trip, and another tank that tends to empty itself. And so I often stop to get food or go to the bathroom, okay, before I even run out of gasoline. But if I was going to go ahead and charge at 400 miles, and you can get vehicles to do that, and the EV1 Lite is going to do that, okay, you'll probably have to sit there and charge for 30 minutes, assuming there's one available for you to charge for 30 minutes. So we're kind of in that chicken or the egg problem right now. So I'm not, if you're going to do the 400-mile range a lot, I wouldn't have an electric car. But if you're doing, as example, my wife has a Camry and I have a Nissan Leaf. And I drove the Camry here because I was worried I wasn't going to be able to do the charging thing. I don't know my way around. So it'll be a little while. With the current infrastructure bill, it's already been passed. I think some of those things will be changed about putting fast chargers out. It's a chicken or the egg problem. This is where we're at. They're legit questions.
We're actually way over time. Thank
sorry.
you for being here. Would you kind enough to stay?
I'll be happy to.
Several people
Be happy
have questions. Great. Thanks so much for your.